back to another episode of Chai Time. I'm your host Selena, and today I'm here with Adnan. Adnan, welcome to Chai Time.
Happy to be here.
How has your week been so far?
Crazy to say the least, but good. In a crazy way.
Okay, that's glad to hear that. And today we also have a really special guest with us today, Aisha Babur. Aisha is somebody who advocates for women's rights, and other than that, she has been working in the research field for quite a while. So she also has keen interest in cyber warfare and things that are really related to the field of tech and AI. So welcome to Chai Time, Aisha. Well, today we have a really interesting topic for you guys, and it's very interesting for a lot of people in the sense that it is related to AI and simulation. So, the title that we have today is Can Gamers Be Better Police Officers? So, we will be talking about AI, we will be talking about gaming and simulation and those sort of things. So, without further ado, let's just find out what we're going to talk about today. So my first question is for Adnan, and could you please define for a lot of people that do not have, a very technical sort of background, what simulation is like, what is AI, and how does that come into dialogue when we talk about, police training and police officers, those sort of things.
Yeah, so I mean, like, definitely the title is more of a clickbaity, because everybody's interested in gaming. But interestingly, gaming has used to be like, very. So when I was growing up, it was a very nerdy thing, right? There would be like, this 5% of us would be gaming, and everybody else would be calling you nerd, and you'd almost be ashamed of playing computer games. But at the same time, it has not this point expanded that everybody is a gamer potentially, and everybody has some kind of game installed, even your grandma, and um, you can't like really go too far without running into something related to gaming. Now, um, policing used to be a very, I would say, simple concept back in the days. And the simple concept was simple because the only thing that police or like public safety was concerned about is physical violence, right? I mean, of course, theft and robbery and all that, but all of these eventually tie down to physical violence. These are physical concepts, which mean that to be a police officer, all you need to do is be like burly, strong, and have some kind of weapon, and generally try to keep peace, right? Not very complicated things to do. Most of the people easily can relate to and understand what it means. Now, this concept in the recent years have evolved and changed so much um, that physical violence is actually the least of most, I would say, peacekeeping efforts at this point, right? Most of the um, new gen unrest that we see in our society is actually related to something that back in the days you would think like belongs in some kind of sci-fi, but it no longer does, right? Like identity theft, personality theft, likeness theft, and a whole bunch of weird digital concepts, which leads to complex societal problems um, and unrest, right? And of course, like monetary theft and all that is still there, but that is also in most cases has shifted to um, online or digital um, financial theft, not really something that somebody is holding you on gunpoint. So the point that I was trying to get to is that being a police officer or being somebody related to keeping in that field is not as simple as it used to be, right? It's not about building a bunch of muscles and learning how to fire a gun. It's actually a good police officer, I think, in the coming days, even now, there are dedicated departments that deal with only digital, and it's like expanding like crazy while physical offices are shrinking. But I think in the coming days, what's going to happen is that most of the good police officers will have to almost be very good technically, like almost like an engineer, right? They have to think like it, they have to act like it, and they have to have a lot of information about a lot of things. So that is already happening now. Where does gaming come into the picture now? Um, so while all of this is required, at the same time, being a police officer is a very different job, right? You need to so the basic um, training has to be in criminology, different, very different from, I would say, an engineer. Engineers are not very concerned about law and these things. And when if you're a public officer, if you're a an attorney general office, like when you're recruiting, you're not really recruiting engineers. I mean, in some cases you can, and people have tried it and with moderate success. But the point comes down to it that you need very different kind of people who know a lot about the technical world, and in order to equip them with the field that is moving so fast at this point, it's almost that everybody is getting motion sickness. You need to rethink how that training is done, right? So there's no gym that you can equip. There's no field training that you can build for them. You have to really rethink, and that's where gaming comes in. And we're not talking about traditional gaming that go and play Call of Duty, but more like gaming in terms of that gamify um, how you equip peace officers with the knowledge. And in our case, what we think this is going to lead down to, um, and we think that everything is going to actually lead down to the same path, which is interactive um, virtual worlds where people, either wear their VR goggles or look at a very big screen, some kind of immersive experience that makes you feel that you're in a different world. Rapidly go through different experiences that helps you learn a lot of things, deal with a lot of complex situations very very quickly without um, a lot of upfront cost, right? So that's where
Yes.
what I mean, at least when I think about simulation or when I think about training peace officers or police.
Okay. And for a lot of people, the question that they might have is that, what sort of advantages does AI simulation training have over, traditional methods of training, that why should we go for that thing? So what would your answer be to that?
So it's not, I wouldn't call it AI simulation training. I would call it digital. Um, so simulation training is not a new concept, first of all, right? So simulation training is a very old concept and goes back to having to train fighter pilots um, in aerial combat, even commercial pilots on how to fly a plane. Because flying a plane is a complex job, but also it's a very dangerous job. If you don't know what you're doing, you don't get second guesses, right? You're going to end up crashing a plane, and that's a very expensive, but also a very there's no undo button there where you say, oh sorry, made a mistake, I'm gonna retry. I mean, even when you're driving a vehicle, it's dangerous, but it's not as dangerous as when you're driving a plane, because that's a lot more costly, but also a lot more life threatening. And there is no slow speed on the plane, right? It has to go to a certain speed in order to fly. So what I was getting at is that simulation training is not a new thing. It has been in practice in a specialized industry for a very long time, especially combat, piloting, and recently it has even been employed in military, and now we're seeing some of this being employed in more commercial industries. But um, uh, so that's a normal thing that does happen. but none of that is immersive, as in that you still create some kind of, or more like you have still have to be in a make believe that, okay, you have to believe that you're doing that, right? And there have been attempt to improve it, but now we're living in an age where it can almost be as good as the real thing, where you in most cases don't even feel the difference, whether you're in interacting with or inside a digital world or like a virtual world or a real world. So in a photorealism, but also very sophisticated sensors, and that leads to a very immersive experience. And what that does um, is really convinces your mind that it is actually dealing with that situation. So there's no make believe there, which means that if you behave correctly in the digital simulation, you will end up behaving correctly or dealing with the situation correctly in the real world as well, right? So we're getting very close to this where it's hard to distinguish which to a lot of people it's more like leading to escapism or entertainment path. And of course we're totally sold on that that's definitely one thing that is going to happen, but also the opportunity there is to actually enable people to learn very complex thing in a very short amount of time. So your grandfather or their grandfather, they spent their entire life learning very skills, and but you might be able to learn the same thing in 1/100th the time, like so something that they took like 60-70 years to learn, you might be able to learn in like in a year or even less, right? And that's a very compelling, I think, selling proposition for me to to start using such technology in the workplace, right? For training employees, but also of course in public service, in public safety, etc.
Yeah. And like technology had been advancing very rapidly, and we see that there is everything is going digital these days. So, how do you think that that sort of advancement in technology is driving this shift to everything, and this AI, this stimulation training being one of the things that we apply in the law enforcement field? So, how do you think that's driving that shift?
Interesting that you bring it up, right? So again, I'll go back to the same point that I'm trying to drive across. Simulation is not a new thing,
Yes.
and I'll actually throw some numbers around so you understand what I'm when I say some like when I'm emphasizing what it means. So a simulation and commercial airliner simulation provided by, let's say, Boeing, or provided by some commercial company typically costs anywhere from a few hundred thousand to a couple of $1 million, right? So that's the kind of a number that we're talking about, right? And which also means that it can only be used by um, Emirates and like your big airliners maybe, but because it costs so much, there's always a long queue of booking that who's gonna use it, which means that the cost is and the it's tough to get your time in line. So they're gonna almost allocate you that, oh, you have to go there and do this, right? Now um, the same thing is true when you talk about any kind of photorealistic simulation that these days have been tried. Um, simulation training in, let's say, commercial enterprise or even government enterprise has happened, right? And I've seen it in like U.S. military, but the same constraints are there. First of all, you have to spend a significant amount of money to build that simulation. Secondly, after you build that simulation, it is a static simulation, which means that's a fixed scenario, which makes it less believable for anybody who's being played. So it has limited applicability, right? Um, Now that hasn't changed really, right? So the technology we're talking about, yes, technology is moving at a very great pace, and we're seeing a lot of demos and a lot of things. Practically speaking, however, this has not have a lot of effect on this sector, right? And the reason for that is that building a demo is easy, building a product is very, 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 very hard. Which also means that most of the company which are trying to get into the AI race, they're just copycatting each other, right? So somebody does something and everybody just goes and start copying themselves. And this is a very tough field to break in, not just um, I would say in terms of business, but also in terms of technical challenges that you face. So most of the players have been shying away from there, right? So all the fancy demos you see actually don't really have any applicability in that realm. So uh, uh, the point I'm driving across is that it's still old school engineering and design work that is being done there to drive it, which means the cost is still pretty high, which also means that it hasn't changed that much, right? A lot of people are eyeing at it, but there is no path to a product that they have there, except of course Opus, because that's where we started with, right? That was the our original
Yes.
vision, that that is the domain that we want to um, um, mm, build, and as in like build the infrastructure for, right? That's where we started, not specifically simulation, but something that applies primarily to gaming and simulation scenarios, which means that we're pretty good in that realm, right? So sorry, did I answer your question? Because what I'm trying to get to is that it hasn't really changed, and we do intend to change it. And but as far as I know, that we're the solo player there. There's no other company that has tried even touching it, because um, very old school, very
Yeah.
hardware engineering driven.
Okay. And do you think that with this sort of technology, even if we use Opus for that sort of thing, do you think that we can reduce the excessive use of force that law enforcement officials might use in other scenarios when they're physically doing it or practically doing things?
I think so. There's not a direct way to say that this is going to happen, but indirectly, my personal experience is that the difference between an effective law enforcement or a police officer and an ineffective one is um, is the kind of training and kind of experience they have, right? So the experienced law enforcement officers understand that a lot of things can be minimized simply by handling them um, correctly, right? So, and if you don't, then things gonna escalate, and they're gonna escalate, and they're gonna escalate, and eventually you're gonna resort to brute force in one way or the other, and that's always the least desirable outcome of any scenario, right? Now, we just talked about the experience part, right? So most experienced law enforcement officer in that field would be considered like if you're in the force for 15 plus year, that would be called an experienced officer,
Yes.
whereas anybody under that would be considered um, not that experienced, right? It's kind of like they're still learning a lot of things, and can we really reduce that time where it doesn't take 15 plus year for an officer to gain the kind of knowledge and the kind of understanding that they can easily and quickly de-escalate most situations, I think so. I think it's again comes down to are we as humans smarter than our grandfather or grandparents? No, we're not. But we do have a lot more sophisticated tools, a lot more easily accessible knowledge at our hand, which makes us a lot more effective at doing tasks that would be considered a work for an entire department in their days, right? So these days, like a single person can do a job of an entire department. So that's I think something that to keep in mind, and once we start applying that to gaining experience, I think that's definitely to me it's an outcome that can be foreseen.
Yes, I think so too. And do you think that with simulation, that we can enhance the decision making skills of the officers, like in the sense that if they have went through this, they have gone through the simulation training, they have some sort of idea of what sort of scenarios they would be in, so when they are actually in those scenarios they can better perform. So do you think that's a case as well?
I think so. And that's actually, there are several studies, and I'm not going to get into simulation, but I will talk about the gaming in general. So there are several studies that show that people who are avid gamer that play a lot of games um, tend to be very good at certain administrative and decision making tasks, right? Because in gaming, especially when you play in real time games, um, you'll have to make a lot of decisions very, very quickly, which, while may not be realistic scenarios, but what it does do is enables or trains your mind um, to walk down different paths much quicker than most people who are not into gaming, right? And these are like a lot of scientific studies that show that this is definitely beneficial, right? Notwithstanding the non-profits who which claim that gaming actually make people more violent. Personally, I've most of the avid gamers I've met, they are much more rational, much more calmer, much less emotional in complex situations than non-gamers. So my personal and take it with a grain of salt because it's anecdotal, right? The people that I know, it's possible that's just my circle, but um, uh, I think it does help people um, be better at the decision making.
Yes, I think so too. And thank you so much, Adnan, for answering our questions. And we will be moving forward to Aisha Babur for the creator segment. Aisha, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, glad to hear that. My first question to you is, what do you think sort of potential benefits are there that simulation training can hold for future of law enforcement?
So I think one of the benefits that's is firstly, I think Adnan also mentioned is about the enhanced officer safety and also how that through this virtual trainings or through this virtual reality trainings or through AI trainings, you can actually better train these officers of how to deal under pressure, how to deal in certain scenarios without actually putting them in a situation of where they could be. Where they could be exposed to any injury or any harm. So, without putting them in a physical certain situation, you basically put them in a virtual environment of a similar situation, and you basically tell them how they could better make decisions under pressure and what are the options and what are the different scenarios that they might have to deal with. So, I think my number one answer would definitely be that it enhances the officer's security and also how they could better, save lives and deal, make decisions under pressure in certain situations. I think my second would be that it also, to some extent, reduces the cost in a sense that you would initially have to invest in this technology and how do you set up this software and how do you set up this, all of this virtual reality setup. But once you have set this up, I think this can go for a long while and this can then help you reduce your cost in terms of like investing into travel, investing into equipments again and again for different sort of trainings. So I think that would be my second. Like answer to what's the potential benefit is. And I think the third benefit is also linked to the first one, that when you have these real life realistic stimulation scenarios and simulation scenarios in front of you, you're basically like exposed to what are the different sort of scenarios that can come in front of you when you have to actually deal in real life situations. So I think these virtual trainings actually help them and better equip them how to deal with the situations when they have them in physically in front of them, and what are the best sort of decisions that they could make under such situations.
Okay. That seems quite promising. And do you think that simulation training is going to be, the next big step of implementing technology when it comes to especially the field of law enforcement? Is it something that we will be seeing? It has been, as Adnan said, it has been there for quite a while. But do you think it's something that is going to get, in the future more attention, or something that's going to be more advanced?
Yeah. Thank you for that question. I think, firstly, again, I think going back to what Adnan said earlier, that there's a lot of different complex issues that are now rising, and you're not only limited to physical sort of violence, etc. You're also exposed to like digital violence, like cyber warfare, like hate speech, etc. So I think it's definitely going to be the next big trend, especially in terms of like law enforcement and how do you sort of like deal with this cyber warfare, cyber threats, and like online hate speech, bullying, etc. So I think in terms of like law enforcement, it's definitely going to be a next big trend. And the second reason for that is also because it's also because it basically teaches these law enforcement agencies and police, etc., to with terms of like skill development, like also like going back to what Adnan said, that how do you make better decisions when you are under pressure, how do you better negotiate, how do you better like save more lives in terms of like causing less harm. So what are those options that you can take? And I think virtual reality or virtual training sessions can actually help them equip better with these situations. And I think my second idea is also that once you are into this virtual training, it has this ability to that you can scale it into a larger project, right? So although I do agree that initially you would have to invest into this idea and you would have to learn how to go about this, but once you have set up this virtual trainings and this idea, it actually has this nature of scalability and adaptability, and then you can implement these trainings across different regions for that matter, right? So you're not limited to certain regions, and because you are limited to your travel is limited, your equipment supply is limited. But once you have this virtual training center, you virtual trainings, so you can do them anywhere, anytime. So I think both of these are my reasoning to why I do definitely see this emerging as a like next trend, definitely in terms of like law enforcement.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, adaptability. How do you think that law enforcement agencies can, ensure that these sort of simulation and trainings they stay up to date with some sort of crises that are evolving and situations that are evolving? How can they make sure that these are up to date?
Yeah. Thank you for the question again, Alina. I think one of the ideas that you basically track crime trends, and you basically stay update on what are the social issues that are happening, right? So again, like we are not again limited to certain forms of violent issues, but we also see certain social issues that require the attention of the law enforcement agencies, such as protests we see in the recent years, right? So when law enforcement agencies stay up to date to the trends of what's happening, what are the social issues that are taking place, these are the things that I think help them better train or better update their trainings. And I think the second idea is also that they time and again review what are the trends that are increasing in the crime. What are the new sort of actions, or what are the new sort of technologies that we see criminals are using, increasingly using, right? It could be either digital weapons, sort of like something, maybe some sort of like digital loopholes that are trying to get into data theft, identity theft, and all of those things. So what are the new technology that these criminals are getting their hands on, and how do we then deal with this, in terms of like how do we update our officers in terms of like in the trainings, and how they can deal with better. And I think the third is obviously that you stay up to date with the new sort of technologies, and what are the new sort of softwares, or what are the new sort of equipments that are trending, and how do we can be the first one to get our hands on those equipments or those softwares, and then we incorporate them into our current existing virtual trainings, and then better enhance the experience of our law enforcement officers, and then basically teach them how they can improve their decisions, they can improve their negotiation skills, and how basically they can act under pressure in case they have to take certain decisions. So I think these are the things that can help them stay up to date and up to the trends of what's happening.
Thank you so much, Aisha, for giving us your insights. It was quite informative, I must say. And moving back to Adnan, can you share any key takeaways that you might have from the topic that we discussed today?
Um, so I mean, like this is a conversation that we had back in 2019, and that was before your metaverse hype and all that, right? And that was conversation was, uh, it gave us a lot of insight how people think about things, but also where things are going. I think that's where the world is going. How long it will take? Maybe 5 years, maybe 10 years, but I see internet. I see the experiences evolving from this point and click, drop down button clicking experience to more immersive experiences where we're interacting with avatars, where we're interacting with realistic scenarios rather than forms and documents. And if that's the world to come, um, it gives us a big opportunity to rethink our training and education system, right? How to better equip um, employees with the with the knowledge that will really help them move forward in that gain the knowledge that they need to do their job best, right? Of course, we're talking about law enforcement, which can really change in terms of the kind of experience they have, the kind of decision making ability they have. So I think uh, that's uh, that's my that's the world that I imagine, right? Where people um, are a lot more knowledgeable about the job they're doing, which basically improves the satisfaction level that we have. Of course, it's gonna also, because humans, we always demand more. Like the more we get, the more we demand. But I see like society in which we are a lot more satisfied with the professionals that are basically the maintainer of the piece of the infrastructure, and that's the way I think we can get there faster by employing modern technology, by employing um, more of these simulation specific trainings.
Yes. And I also believe that, technology is also fun as well. Like if you were to see simulation, if you were to be doing this sort of simulation training, you would see that it's very immersive and it's something that gives you a very new sort of a perspective on to how to deal with this situation. So I would say that it is a good investment. And Aisha, if you would like to share any insights that you might have from today's topic.
I think definitely my key takeaway is that how this is going to be a next emerging trend, and how this is also going to help companies save from investing in like equipments physically or trainings physically, but they can then move to like these virtual trainings, which then can also not be helpful at the current time, but we definitely see like digital trends emerging as the next big trend. So I think in the current time, if the companies invest in something like this, it's definitely going to be helping them in the near future, instead of them investing later into this, because when all of the people have already invested in this. So I think now is the time that you do invest in your digital, like in your digital platform and in your virtual trainings as well.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you so much, everybody who has tuned in for today's episode. We are glad that you guys joined us. And next week, we will be coming up with a really interesting topic. And make sure that you guys check out the Opus website. And for today, we would be saying bye bye to everybody. Bye.
Bye.